There is never a day so dreary, there is never a night so long, but the soul that is trusting Jesus will somewhere find a song. Wonderful, wonderful Jesus, in the heart he implanted a song of deliverance, of courage, of strength. In the heart he implanted a song. There is never a cross so heavy, there is never a weight or woe, but that Jesus will help to carry, because he loveth so. Wonderful, wonderful Jesus, in the heart he implanted a song of deliverance, of courage, of strength. In the heart he implanted a song. There is never a care or burden, there is never a grief or loss, but that Jesus in love will lighten when carried to the cross. Wonderful, wonderful Jesus, in the heart he implanted a song of deliverance, of courage, of strength. In the heart he implanted a song. There is never a guilty sinner, there is never a wandering one, but that God can in mercy pardon through Jesus Christ his Son. Wonderful, wonderful Jesus, in the heart he implanted a song of deliverance, of courage, of strength. In the heart he implanted a song.
Thank you, David, Diane. Thank you both for that. Our scripture this morning comes from the Old Testament, the book of 1 Kings. I'll be in chapter 12, and I'll be reading verses 25 through 33. That is 1 Kings chapter 12, verses 25 through 33. Then Jeroboam built Shechem in Mount Ephraim and dwelt therein, and went out from thence and built Penuel. And Jeroboam said in his heart, Now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. If this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they shall kill me, and go again to Rehoboam, king of Judah. Whereupon the king took counsel, and made 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And he set the one in Bethel, and the other put he in Dan. And this thing became a sin. For the people went to worship before the one, even unto Dan. And he made an house of high places, and made priests of the lowest of the people, which were not of the sons of Levi. And Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month, on the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast that is in Judah, and he offered upon the altar. So did he in Bethel, sacrificing unto the calves that he had made. And he placed in Bethel the priests of the high places which he had made. So he offered upon the altar which he had made in Bethel the 15th day of the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised of his own heart, and ordained a feast unto the children of Israel. And he offered upon the altar and burnt incense. May God bless this, the reading of his holy word. The question that I want to ask this morning is how, as we, the church, how do we do religion? How do we reach people in our own community? Even the secular press seems rather interested in what we're doing and how we're doing it these days. Several articles have appeared fairly recently on presenting religion to whatever the name of the most recent post-millennial Gen Z or whatever their name is. The writers tend to feature groups who fashion their message to accommodate their hearers. It's a temptation as old as Rehoboam and Jeroboam. And to understand it, I think we need to have just a little bit of history. King Solomon led Israel to maintain material splendor that dazzled the surrounding world. But in building the magnificent temple and other public works, he nearly bankrupted his people. We talked about the limits of his wisdom last week. When he died, his son Rehoboam succeeded him, but Rehoboam's rival was a man named Jeroboam, who was a popular leader who asked the new king to reduce the taxes. Upon receiving the request, the king asked his cabinet for advice. The older advisors recommended lightening the taxes, but the younger men suggested an even tougher policy. They told him to make the yoke heavier than his father Solomon had made it, and the new king followed their advice and said that where Solomon had chastened them with whips, he would chasten them with scorpions. Well, that tough talk didn't have the desired effect. It just divided the kingdom. The traditional number of 10 tribes of Israel, I can never count more than 8.5, but nevertheless, the northern tribes of Israel revolted under Jeroboam's leadership, and they formed the northern country of Israel, with the capital at Shechem. The remaining 2 tribes formed the southern kingdom, Judah and part of Benjamin, under Rehoboam, with the capital at Jerusalem. After Jeroboam set up the northern kingdom, he began to worry about devout Israelites who felt obliged to worship down at the temple in Jerusalem. He feared that if the people continued to go to Jerusalem, they might come under the influence of King Rehoboam, who ruled there. So how could he prevent that? He hit upon a plan. He made 2 gold calves and said to his people, "It's too much trouble to go to Jerusalem. Behold your new gods." Now, at first glance, this looked like a rather shrewd plan. Sounded like a plausible argument. Jeroboam planned his idea upon the principle of convenience and comfort. It's too much for you to go to Jerusalem. That appeal to convenience is in line with our modern ideas of progress. If we were to ask about modern American civilization and how it is superior to other modes of living, we would mention at once our physical comforts and conveniences. Our houses are larger, more comfortable. Housekeeping involves less drudgery. Well, in theory, I'm sure. Travel is faster. We can hear voices and see people on the other side of the earth instantaneously, all while remaining in the comfort of our chairs. We are, after all, a sitting civilization. Earlier in the last century, Karel Capek, in a drama, R.U.R., Rossum's Universal Robots, satirized the modern cult of comfort. He depicted scientists creating mechanical slaves to do our work. And he has one of his characters say the following: "I'm disgusted by pain. I'm revolted by poverty. I want a new generation." The whole of mankind turned into the aristocracy of the world, an aristocracy nourished by millions of mechanical slaves, unrestricted, free, and perfect. Isn't that the goal of material progress? We measure our personal advancements by the increase in our comforts. We frequently will hear it said, or will say ourselves, "I don't want my children to have it as hard as I had it." John McMurray, in The Clue to History, says, "The individualistic struggle for freedom is a struggle to escape from work. Universal freedom signifies to us universal leisure." We of the sitting generation, we who long to make life as easy as possible, can appreciate the appeal of Jeroboam when he said to his people, "It's too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Behold, your gods here at home." Jeroboam was simply applying the principle of comfort and convenience to the realm of religion. And that's in line with today's trends. We try to bring the church as conveniently near the people as possible. If the people move out of a community into suburbs, the church follows. Moreover, we're told the church should give people what they want. Public relations experts advise preachers to give sermons on how to be happy, how to succeed, how to live well, how to get ahead and accomplish whatever you wish, how to be prosperous. In fact, there's a name for this. It's called the prosperity gospel, and it is especially popular with televangelists. There is, of course, some logic to this argument. The church does exist to serve people. We want our services to be interesting and helpful, and we want people to be comfortable enough not to be distracted. But contrast American attempts to sell religion with what goes on with churches in Eastern Europe. There's no advertising in the newspapers, or along the roadside, or in electric signs. There are no signs in front of the churches advertising clever sermon titles or the hours of service. There are no cushioned pews. The worshipers stand. Services in the Orthodox churches can last 3 hours or even more. And many of the churches are so packed with people standing that the chief function of ushers is to clear out a way to the exit so that the people who are getting ready to faint can make it safely outside. And here we sit. Maybe we've carried our cult of comfort and convenience to the point that has made us soft and complacent. Paul tells us to put on the whole armor of God, and we think of it as a tailor-made custom suit cut to our measurements. But a faith that is made to suit ourselves will not suffice in times of crisis. To be sure, there is a sense in which the church must try to attract people and to make the gospel appealing. But the church of the crucified Christ exists to make people good rather than to make them feel good, to meet their needs rather than cater to their desires. When Jeroboam appealed to his people's convenience and said, "It is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Behold, your God's near at hand." He was following a cult of comfort, which can be carried too far. And what does the very next verse in 1 Kings say to that last sentence? And this thing became a sin. Why does this cult of convenience become a sin? Because it separated a person from the one true God. Sin is whatever separates us from God. God is a father, and his children keep in communion with him by the same attitudes which hold children to an earthly parent. If a child is to develop a wholesome relationship with a father, there must be a love and caring on the part of the parents, and obedience and discipline on the part of the children. The child's desires of the moment yield to the parents' wider experience. The child's will must submit at times to the parents' understanding. When children grow up in a home whose convenience and pleasure come first, they become spoiled children. The irony is that children who never put themselves out to help or please a parent never learn how to take in what the parent can give. The person who never puts himself out for a friend never takes in the true blessings of a friendship. Children raised in families which try to run on the principle of personal comfort without sacrificial cooperation are headed for troubled marriages. If we are to take in friendship, love, and God, we must put ourselves out. That's why Jeroboam's worshiping convenient gods became a sin. We must put ourselves out if we are to take something better in. And a religious faith that is fashioned to suit ourselves separates us from God. If we follow the Jeroboam principle of emphasizing our own comfort, of worshiping the gods conveniently near, the thing becomes a sin because it suits our own growth. About 85 years ago in England, a distinguished journalist wrote a little book called The Unquiet Grave. He used the pen name Apollinaris, who was the helmsman in Aeneas's ship. Anyhow, he said in this book that the tendency to measure progress by individual comforts and the obsession with pursuing our own self-satisfaction bury us in an unquiet grave of self-centeredness. Unquiet because we are tormented by our own restlessness. In a book are such sentences as this: "Sometimes I get a feeling of claustrophobia, of being smothered in my own personality." Or, "We are serving a life sentence in the dungeon of self." Or, "The ego is like a cell that overasserts itself and causes cancer." The self-centered, self-willed person who wants everything, even his or her religion, adjusted to fit that person's own convenience and pleasure, is not only stunting their own growth, but is starting a cancerous growth within it, the spirit that can prove fatal. The gods of comfort lead to the grave. Another writer in Britain was C.S. Lewis, whose many books include one called The Great Divorce. In that book, he says, there are only two kinds of people in the end: those who say to God, "Thy will be done," and those who say to God, "Thy will be don't." All those in hell chose the latter. Indeed, without that self-choice, there could be no hell. Those are strong words. We choose an unquiet grave, our own self-destruction, when we adopt the attitude, it's too much to go to Jerusalem to worship the one true God, behold the gods so comfortably near. So which are we? Those who say to God, thy will be done, or those whom God says, go, but I won't be there with you. Have it your way, not mine. Jeroboam and his northern tribes joined that latter group, and what became of them? They disappeared. They became known to the tradition as the lost tribes. And that was the end of their story. But how does our story end? Does it end with our own comfort, or the often uncomfortable following wherever God leads us and doing whatever he tells us to do? Now is the time we choose to decide. Now is the time we make a commitment. Will we trust him and follow him, or have a religion of our own decision to suit ourselves? Our hymn